Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Season 5, Episode 2.
Welcome back, friends, for our most magical episode so far. Today, we traveled all the way to Estero, Florida, to hang out with a world-renowned mentalist and illusionist. He's been featured on Ellen, America's Got Talent, CNN, Today, NBC, ABC, CBS, National Geographic, everywhere it seems. Welcome to the show, Wayne Hoffman.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Dude, thank you for letting me come kick it at your house. This is a sweet house, and the first time I ever had to go through a gate. So I'm like glad that I had that experience. I actually I don't know what hit me. This was like a few years ago, but for whatever reason, I had it in my mind that anytime I have an opportunity to do something I've never done, I want to do it. Even if it wasn't on my bucket list, I'm like, if I haven't done something, I want to do it. And I would go every day, I shouldn't say every day, but often, anytime I had free time, I would think what's something I could do today that even if I didn't want to necessarily, what's something I could do today that I've never done? And I remember one time I was going for a little hike, and I was sitting outside, I was reading this book, and I was like, I have a few hours of free time. What's something I could do? And just as an example, I was like, I've never shot a handgun. I bet I know somebody. So I text a friend. I'm like, you got a handgun, right? He's like, yeah. And I was like, you want to go shoot it? He's like, yeah. So I know it's a tangent, but in general, the fact that now I can say that I went through a little gated community, kind of tight. I'm stoked about that. So, so anyways, who are you and what are you passionate about?
I love that question because it's not what's your name and what do you do. That's a better way to ask it. Who are you and what are you passionate about? I'll give you two different answers. Who am I as a being? I'm a father and a son and a brother and a artist and a lover, fighter. And what's my name? My name is Wayne Hoffman. And what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about magic, mind reading, and illusion, which also happens to be my career.
Which is awesome. Hopefully everybody can find ways to incorporate those things. That's kind of what the point of the show is, right? Hopefully for people to figure out what are the things that I would really enjoy doing. I was at this kava bar the other day, and my friend Jake, he was asking this question. He's like, so what's your dream job? To this kid. He was 19. He's like, I don't know. And I was like, what's maybe a better question is, if you won the lottery, how would you choose to spend your time? If money didn't matter, how would you choose to spend your time? And if you can say that you do pretty much the same things you currently do, that's awesome. And I bet you would probably do a lot of the same things you currently do.
Yeah, oh no, without a doubt. It's funny because I get paid to do what I do. I travel around and do magic and mind reading, but I also do it for free because I enjoy it. If I'm just hanging out, and just kicking it, I'll do some crazy stuff, just for my friends, just because I really, truly enjoy what I do.
That's awesome, man. I mean, for me, hanging out at the skateboard shop, that's my main career. And this is now taken over almost. It's kind of crazy, but my skateboard shop's still my main career. I used to just hang around skateboard shops anyways. And
yeah.
And whenever I travel, I always go to whatever the local skateboard shops are too, and I'll still spend hours at them. It's just I don't know. It's my people. It's my place. I like hanging out there anyway. So the fact that I get to do that all the time is pretty perfect. So for following me, if people want to get a hold of me, they already know. That's why they're listening to the show. But it's easy to find me on Instagram. That's the main thing. But for you, how can people best follow you and get in contact if they felt so inclined?
Great question. So the easiest way is go to waynehoffman.com. Now, you might forget this, so I'll spell it out and try to remember. It's WayneHoffman. And there's also some really wild videos on there of me doing my thing. So if you like magic and mind reading and illusion, go there. And then it also has links to pretty much all my social media, YouTube, the Instagram's on there, at Wayne Hoffman. Just go to that and you'll find me.
So I went there, right? Because obviously I try to research guests and stuff, and who doesn't want to watch magic? And I hate to just call it magic because I know there's a whole lot more to it, which we'll get to. But I went there and I watched through all the videos that you had listed on there. I don't know how many there were. But you did this one where you went to this pawn shop, right? And you had this key from Harry Houdini. I just immediately wanted to know, for one, how did you get a hold of that key? And Houdini must have obviously been like an inspiration or somebody you looked up to, a hero of sorts. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have had that thing. Do you have more treasures like that?
Always feel like a pirate trying to make sure my treasures are safe. But yeah, I like to collect things. Some of them, actually, the room we're in right now I have a bunch of things from just traveling around the world that I collected and picked up. They're monetarily useless, but, one might be a little rock, one might be a cup, but, they're all memories. So I like to collect things. And yeah, at that time, and that's a show that I filmed a long time ago. And the whole concept was people that have really cool, weird, interesting, unique, really out there objects that they sell. So that I did that show, and it was a Houdini key, which was part of the private collection of Harry Houdini. And the story behind the key is there was a gentleman by the name of Sid Radner, and Sid was friends with Harry Houdini's brother, Theo, who went by the stage name Houdini. So after Houdini passed away, his brother inherited his collection of keys and locks and handcuffs, and Sid Radner eventually became friends with Houdini's brother. And when he was hanging out, he asked, "Hey, could I buy some of Houdini's things?" And then eventually the collection was passed to him after Theo/Houdini passed away. Then Sid had the collection at a museum. If I'm not mistaken, it was actually in Wisconsin, in Appleton, Wisconsin. And the, museum was going through financial difficulties and couldn't rent it out to Sid, the space. I guess they were paying to host the collection. So he had no home for the collection, so Sid sold at auction all of these Houdini items. That was purchased by someone who was friends with Sid, and then I ended up purchasing it from him. So yeah, that's how I ended up getting it. It was passed down through 4 different people from Houdini and ended up in my hands.
Wild. I should have got one. I'm pretty sure Houdini's from Wisconsin. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I learned that as a fun little fact through school at some point, which I think is why that museum would have been there. I could be wrong. Fact checkers.
That is true. The short version is he was actually immigrated from Budapest, Hungary, and he moved with his parents to Appleton, Wisconsin, and lived there for quite some time. Yeah, that's a little fun fact.
Wild. So Houdini obviously was somebody who other, like, what were the other people that kind of inspired you to do what you do? Do you still have people that you kind of like look for inspiration that you look up to now that you're like the superstar?
Yeah, not a superstar yet. I'm the most famous person you've never heard of. That's what I am. Yeah, man, growing up as a kid, as far as mystery arts, and that's really encompasses what I do, because I don't just stay in one lane of just sleight of hand or just mind reading, anything mysterious I'm about. So there was only really one main guy on the scene, which was David Copperfield. Any magician growing up in my era will tell you he was the man. He was on television all the time, and he had the cool illusions, and was the big touring mystery performer. So you look up to a guy like that because he's doing it. He's on television. He made it. And then the other people that I look up to are people that really the average person wouldn't know. There are guys from the late early 1900s, Alexander. He was a mind reader. If you ever see an image of a mind reader with like a turban on, that kind of cliche, the Zoltar machine that gives you your fortune, those are all references to Alexander. The old Johnny Carson show. He would do a skit with Karnak where he would come out with a turban on and do these fake funny readings. Again, a reference to Alexander. That was the biggest mentalist mind reader of the time. He made more money in adjusted dollars for inflation than the Beatles did during their time. And he toured the world, So I look up to somebody like that. He was just a master of publicity. So yeah, Copperfield, him, and then there's a lot of modern day mind readers and mentalists that I look up to. My colleagues were in the same field, but I find a lot of inspiration from people outside of my own art as well. I look to others. A lot of magicians and mentalists stay in their lane, and they like to only hang out with magicians, or a lot of musicians will only hang out with musicians. Me, I really don't. I look to other art forms and I look for inspiration outside of it. But yeah, as far as inspiration, people I look up to, Copperfield, he's the king, and then the OG Alexander as far as mind reading.
Yeah, Copperfield's incredible. So I've never seen, he's the only one that I've ever seen. So my brother-in-law, he works in entertainment, Tom Gray. He was on season 2, I want to say. Good episode. Shout out, Tom, you rule. But his bachelor party he did out there. So we went out there, and then I stayed longer because it was cheaper for me to be in Vegas from Wednesday through Monday. The flight and hotel all included. It was cheaper to do that than for the weekend.
Oh, it makes sense.
Yeah, so I was there longer. So I had an extra day, and I was
Yeah.
like, I could go see David Copperfield. So I went and saw that, and yeah, I don't know. That was pretty incredible. To touch on the other thing, I think it's extremely important to look outside of your industry, right? Because how are you going to come up with creative new thinking? So nothing's totally unique, right? It's really hard to have something that's like 100% unique. It may just be unique to like your area, but almost always when you see something, somebody gained inspiration from something kind of similar from somewhere, or they incorporated it, in that kind of way. You see it with music too, where a lot of songs that do really well, there's an instrument playing in that song that you're like, I wouldn't have expected that. You know what I mean? Or like my favorite rapper is MF Doom, RIP, he died a few weeks ago. But his, like the beats and stuff behind it are really unique, and a lot of times pull in. It's not just your trappy, like typical keyboard beat. And when you can pull that stuff in, it really makes you sound unique. If you can take those skills from other industries, things that you learn, and pull them into yourself, that's how you're able to build this like big repertoire of skills. That's how you can really stand out, I think. So I think that's really smart. Plus, like, it must get boring to talk to people about the same stuff all the time. You know what I mean? Like, I got not necessarily burnt out with skateboarding, but I definitely got to the point, and part of the reason I love the show is because I'm learning all these things, like-minded people, but like totally different industries. So I'm not having the same conversations over and over and over again. And you just touched on a lot of things, which is why I want to address them. I love that you didn't just talk about Copperfield, because in the skateboarding world, or again, in any world, people who don't know skateboarding, you're like, oh, Tony Hawk. People all the time, they're like, have you met Tony Hawk? And I'm like, no, I haven't met Tony Hawk. That'd be cool, but no. But the funny thing is, like, I never looked up to Tony Hawk outside of like, yeah, he was super famous. But whenever you get into an industry, right, and kids got into skateboarding because of the Tony Hawk video games, or because Bam Margera was huge on TV, or because, whatever, they're their favorite pros. But once you get into something, that's when you start digging in, and you find all the people that you actually are really stoked about. So yeah, in any industry, like there's always going to be those people that are like, these are the really cool people, and I want to show you these people.
Yeah. And on that note, I'll chime in and tell you, if you guys like mystery entertainment, there are 2 guys out of the gate. As far as magic and illusion, there's a guy named Cyril Takayama. He's just an awesome magician from Japan. So you can go on YouTube and go down a rabbit hole on his stuff. And then Mentalism, Darren Brown from the UK. He's not a household name in the US. He has a few Netflix shows. You can go on Netflix and watch them. But go on YouTube, watch his stuff, and just incredible stuff. So, again, you don't know their names, but really good in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know your skill, like on a different show, somebody asked you like how you get this, and it's like it's not necessarily just a talent, right? It's a skill that you develop. And I know that, as a mentalist, you always describe it, and I can let you describe it. But, you study psychology, so you can learn a lot of these things. When was it that you kind of made that conscious decision, though, that you wanted to become an entertainer? Was it when you were studying psychology? Were you studying psychology to do something totally different? Like, when did that decision kind of come?
Yeah, so my journey, I'll keep this brief because I could tell the long-winded version. But the short version is, like I said earlier, I do what I do because I love it. It is my thing. It's where my energy flows and where I feel fulfilled. So I had done it for a hobby just because I did it. And then I slowly started to, people would offer to pay me to do it because, they heard, Wayne's a magician. Wayne's a mentalist. Wayne does these incredible things. Really? And so I got this phone call, and it was, hey, someone told me you're a magician. Will you come to my party and entertain these people while we hang out? And I'm like, you want to pay me, you mean? They're like, yeah, I want to hire, pay me. So I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. Like getting paid to do something you love is unheard of. You know, I'm in my back of my brain, I'm like, I'm supposed to hate my job. So I'm like, that's cool. So I did it as a hobby for a while. Maybe, let's see, I started when I was maybe 10-ish. First paying show, I was 15. And then from there, between 15 and 18, and I think I got a little bit of luck here because I didn't have bills, I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have car payments. You know, during those years, I slowly built up this little business naturally, completely organically, where, you know, somebody would see me at a party that I did a show at, and then they would say, hey, can you do my party? And then 2 people would see me there, and they'd both ask me to, you know, perform at their events. And so between 15 and 18, all of a sudden I'm making money. People are handing me cash to do something that I truly love. And I'm thinking, wow, this is crazy. So the pivotal moment was I was 18. I was studying psychology in a university. And that's when I started really getting into the mental stuff. You know, how can I use psychology to put into what was at that point mostly illusions. I was doing things that you would see that were incredible, but I wanted people to have like a mental experience. And I really found my niche there, my home. You know, I didn't want to make women levitate or necessarily do things like that. I wanted to freak people out mentally. So at that point, at 18 was my turning point. I found my real niche within mystery entertainment, which is mentalism. And then at 18, now it's big boy time. I got to get a job. I got to get out in the real world. You know, I want to go pay for things and have a car and I'm becoming a man. So the key moment was my aunt worked collecting tolls on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And when they gave away these tickets, on the back of them, you could, I guess, as a business sponsor and put an ad on the back of them. So an office supply store put an ad on the back for $10 off a set of business cards. And she knew I was thinking, you know, I might want to do this as a job. And I had applied for a job at a bank as a sales representative for a huge New England-based bank, and they offered me the position. And it's like, I took all these tests and interviewed, and now it's in front of me. I got to make a choice. I work for the bank or go do this crazy, basically run away with the circus in most people's eyes. And my aunt came to me and she said, hey, Wayne, I know you're thinking about starting a business. If you want to get business cards, here's a coupon. And I kind of took that as a sign. I'm like, I got to get these business cards. So I declined a position working as a sales rep for a huge bank and said, it's go time. Went, printed these generic business cards, you know, black and white, totally generic. Put my name, phone number, what I did. And now I'm sitting here doing an interview on a podcast with you, sir. So yeah, that's the moment. That's what happened.
Well, I always try to explain to people, like when we're talking about like things we're passionate about as careers, when people are like, how do you make money doing it though? People always like come to, how do you make money doing it? And I always try to explain to people, like, the point is you just want to do it regardless of money. And if you get good at it because you really love it, money tends to follow.
True.
You know, you can't like totally ignore the fact that you need to make money, especially when you have kids like we do and stuff like that. But ultimately, like the money will just start flowing in. So like with the show, the whole first season I did, you know, as a whole complete project before I even figured out where it was going to go or put anything out. And I just started making them, right? And my guests were people that I knew personally. Well, then once people started hearing them, then I started having people reach out to me. Well, then later on, people are hitting me up saying like, what do I have to do this? How do I get my business featured on it? Over time, then all of a sudden sponsors are hitting me up and they're like, okay, well, can I pay you to interview this person? Or can I do this or that or whatever? And I'm like, this is really cool how this has just kind of worked out. Where like part of that came from me already having like business knowledge of understanding by doing like my skate shop the way I did. Money's just going to come, you know, so I just knew that if I made a really cool project like this, money was slowly going to come. But it's like, it's cool when you can recognize, or when you can have that like position that you're in where the money starts flowing.
Yes.
First.
Totally. And that's how it should be. I think a lot of people, you know, they have a passion and they're so focused in on the dollar, which is good. I don't think it should be the money. I think you need to really love what you do. And then, there's an old saying, it goes, money flows where attention goes. And attention usually follows people that are really passionate about what they do. So if people see you loving life and you're really passionate about this thing and you happen to do it really well, because let's face it, you could be passionate and be terrible at it.
Right.
I could cite a million examples, but, if you're passionate about it and you're at least pretty good where people would maybe pay you possibly to do that, if you just rock out with what you really love, it's nearly inevitable that people will find value in it. And people really, a lot of folks don't realize that. They think, I have to form an LLC and then I have to, do this and worry about money and that. No, don't focus in on that. I think you got it. When you love something, first of all, you'll get over the hurdles. You got to be passionate about anything because you're going to put up with a lot of BS. That's if you monetize it or not. There's struggles that come with things, but if you love it so much, those fall by the wayside. So yeah, doing something you love, following your passion, and truly just engaging with something that you love, you would be surprised how eventually the universe, and I don't want to get too heady here with woo-woo, but how the universe will support you.
Oh, absolutely. It's about manifesting that destiny. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And one other thing, and I've brought this up on the show before, but I love it. I forget which guest it was, so I apologize. Anyways, forget who it was, but they're talking about how, when you're in that position where it's like, okay, my opportunity is to maybe make money doing these magic shows, maybe, or for sure making money, going to the bank. Most people, because they're scared, they think about the worst case scenario.
Yes.
But what's really important is to flip that and go, okay, well, but what's the best case scenario?
Yes. There's a quote. I gotta interject. This is a great quote. It's a simple little mantra I live by, and it's, if you're gonna tell yourself a story, why not make it a good one? You know what I'm saying? We protect ourselves because the human brain, not that I know anything about it, is wired to protect yourself from pain more than it is to acquire pleasure. That's why in sales and marketing, you want to appeal to people's pain points. What pain are you going to relieve from someone? What problem will you solve? Not what benefit and happiness are you going to have? They focus in on, you always see the commercials, does your back ache? And it shows a lady going, oh, my back. It shows the problem, and then we can solve that problem. So, the human mind always wants to look to that. How can I protect myself? And we go into, the fight or flight mode. And yes, that certainly keeps people from going that unknown path. Fear of the unknown, greatest fear in the world. That's why public speaking is actually, along with fear of the dark, one of the top fears. Fear of the dark, you're not afraid of the dark. You're afraid of the thing you don't know what it is. That's why we're afraid of the dark. The dark doesn't do anything to you. It's just the lack of light. But what is the lack of light? It's not knowing what's out there. So yeah, I'm a huge believer that if you follow your passion and if you're smart enough to gather resources that will teach you things and learn, you can overcome that fear of the unknown and go and cross over in there. But we're hardwired to take the easy path for sure.
Yeah. Well, and in today's world, 2021 already, dang. But in today's world, those resources you're referring to are so much more readily available.
Instantly.
Whether it's just like DMing somebody on Instagram that already works in the space that's successful, whether it's Googling it and going to YouTube or whatever to watch a video on how to do something. Like, there's so many more resources. But to move on a little bit, because I want to know this, you talked like you like, doing the illusions and stuff, but, watching some of the videos, there's one I watched, it must have been a corporate event, where you like filled this Coke can, and we'll get to that trick later. But what I gathered from it was like just a really happy feeling. You know what I mean? Like you were talking to people about like reliving their childhood to a certain degree. And I don't think it was really just about, the illusion. I think it was really spreading a certain kind of message. So getting into that, what is it that motivates you to still be doing this? Why is the fire still burning? Because you are already reached, there's no ceiling really with entertainment, but you already like climbed the biggest part of the mountain, I would assume. Like, you're in a good space. Why are you still so motivated to do it?
That's an awesome question. Two things. Number one, thank you for telling me in the words, in the way that you told me about your experience watching that, because it summarizes my true belief and why I do what I do. So that was a perfect way and a perfect segue into this. It's not about the trick. When I do something amazing, it's not to make you ask, "Wow, how did he do that?" That's not the point. Not now. Or I think when I was a kid, that was the point. Hey, I want to do a cool trick to make you go, "Wow, how did you do that?" And feel. But now that's changed because I realize the power in my art form. It's to take the trick and use it as the mechanism for serving someone a dose of medicine. It's to change someone's perspective of life, okay? So before anything, I'm an entertainer. I just so happen to entertain utilizing a skill set of sleight of hand, illusion, mentalism, and psychology. But what purpose does that serve? I feel now my purpose and what drives me and that burning fire is to let people recognize the fact that right now we are going through life like zombies. We get up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, fall asleep, rinse and repeat, and then we have these bursts, these little moments of, work, as they say, working for the weekend. I work so I can live life on the weekend. I'm trying to take people away from that. With what I do with illusion, I want to pull the rug out from people just for a moment so they snap back into realizing what life is really about and what you can make it. People always say, "What's the meaning of life?" The meaning of life is for you to figure out how to leave it, meaning to find your passion. What you're doing here and the theme and the ideals of this podcast are in tandem with what I'm trying to do. It's to take people out of the daily grind. We get in rhythms, and human beings love patterns. We love it. That's why we have the same holidays every year. It's rinse and repeat. But before you know it, time passes you by. And this is something I say in my show. Did you ever take a shower and you snap out of something? Maybe you drop the shampoo and all of a sudden, bang, you snap out of it. And you can't remember what you just washed. And you're like, whoa, because you were doing that routine that you do every day mindlessly. So you do a quick once over to make sure you hit everything. Or when you drive somewhere and when you get to your destination, you put the car in park and you snap out of something. And you wake up and can't remember anything about the drive you just took. And it's in those moments that we lose our lives. People always say, where did the years go? Where does the time go? We ask that question, but did you ever really try to figure out the answer? And so I did. I was trying to figure out where does time go? Why does it seem the past 10 years just flew by? It's because we're living in these, cycles where we don't snap out of it and we lack magic in our lives, partially because we don't seek it and we don't follow our passion, and our magic is in following our passions. But at the same time, you're just doing these daily routines, and you don't find a sense of wonder and joy. And children have an amazing ability to do it. They live in now. Kids don't worry about the past and the mistakes they made in the past. They don't worry about what's going to happen 2 years from now. They live in the moment with their toys and what they see and what they're interacting with. So my job is to make people do that as well and go back to that. And that's what drives me.
I know you kind of already said like when, you made that decision, but everybody has those moments that, you want to call like your big break or whatever, when realistically, like it's usually not the one thing that really triggers everything. But I know like you were on a lot of shows. Was there one that kind of stood out to you as being like a big break or just in general a moment that you were like, I can't believe I'm here right now?
Yeah, so it's twofold. The first big show that I ever did, I remember the moment. I was driving through Kentucky, and I was on tour, and I was in the middle of nowhere, like Hazard, Kentucky, like deep in Kentucky, and my manager called me and said, "Hey, you're gonna be on NBC." I'm like, what? And at this time, I was just a guy doing my thing, traveling around doing shows. And I did the show. It was a live primetime television on NBC on a show called Phenomenon. And that was the big break as far as I just made it on primetime national television for a show that lasted, I think, 2 months weekly. And that was a huge break. However, that was the moment where I got the TV footage to prove credibility to the world. Like, okay, if they put this guy on television, he's at least pretty okay at what he's doing. He's not just some random guy that just made this up and started doing it last week. He's clearly a professional. And then from that appearance, I was able to then have an open door and use that as kind of my credibility to get on the Ellen Degeneres show. And that moment, I think, that was the moment where, and I think that show really has served the most, served me the most in promoting myself. Because if you've been on Ellen, I think, it's a powerhouse show. It's a powerhouse show. So to say you've done, wow, okay, you've been on Ellen, awesome. And sitting in that chair, okay, I'm just a dude, right? Like, who am I? Some dude from Pennsylvania who's just does magic and mind reading. I'm sitting in the chair and Ellen's interviewing me and talking to me, and I'm like going, I'm in my TV right now, man. This is crazy. Like, and it's to this day, it still, gets me. So I think that moment was the moment where things shifted for me.
Was it right after that you stopped spiking your hair?
Yeah. You know what? It's funny. Let me think. No, it was four years later I stopped spiking my hair. Yeah. I had to go through a phase of getting out of the spike hair look.
Well, although I love going on your website, and it had all the videos, and I'm like, you could tell the timestamp because of the hair and the dressing and stuff. I was like, what year is this? That's rad.
Yeah.
So I talked about the Coke can thing because that's just my personal favorite of all the like tricks that I've watched on all the videos and stuff. You can find that over on WayneHoffman.com. But can you summarize to picture in their heads what that trick is? But after that, I really want to know, like, what's your personal favorite one that you do? I'm sorry for calling it a trick if a trick's like the wrong term.
No, that's jargon. You're fine. You could call it whatever you want. We'll call it a miracle. Well, let me cut you off at the pass and tell you your favorite just so happens to be mine. Awesome. So it's a little bit anticlimactic, but I think that you liked that makes sense because I like that one as well. And so if you're wondering what he's talking about, what I do is throughout my entire show, let's say it's an hour-long show, toward the beginning I crack open a can of cola. It could be Pepsi, Coke, whatever. And I just pour it into a little glass and I'm drinking it throughout the show. Like a comedian might take a sip of a drink on a stool or what have you, and I just go over in between little experiments. I go over and have a sip, and it's kind of in the background. And then so you see me pouring this can of cola out into the glass and drinking it. And at the very end of the show, spoiler alert, I talk about being a kid again and using your imagination and how important it is. I show slides and photos of me, as a kid, and remind everybody we're all still the same person we are now as we were as a child. Two things change. You get older and you learn stuff. But I talk about the power of imagination. And so I crushed the can, so you can see it's crushed and empty. You just saw me pour it out over an hour and drink it. And then if there's cameras in the venue, we zoom in on the can. I'm holding it in my hand, and I tell people to concentrate and imagine like they did when they were a child. And the dents come out of the can. Slowly, you see the dents go back in time, and then I take the hole and wave my hand over it, and the hole reseals itself. And I hand it to somebody in the front row, and they tap on it, and it's resealed. Then I slowly fill this can up, and you can hear it filling up. And then I have someone in the front row touch it, and I say, imagine it getting colder, and it gets colder and colder, and they can feel it. And again, the can is in full view the entire time. There's no tricky things, You're watching this happen. And then at the end, I crack it open and make a toast to everybody, and I pour out a full can of cola into a glass. And it's a surreal moment, especially when, you watch the entire performance. So it's the message behind it about using your imagination and having that childlike sense of wonder. And that's why it's my favorite thing.
Yeah, and a lot of that just comes down to people can be good at telling a joke or good at telling a story, or they can be horrible at it. It's all about the whole delivery and the story behind it. And that's what I love so much about it. The trick itself was definitely cool, but the whole story behind it, envisioning yourself as a child, the whole thing that goes on. Definitely go to WayneHoffman.com and watch it, and you'll see what we're talking about. But I really love the entire performance of it. I think you do it super, super well. Switching, I try not to talk crazy business, but talking business a little bit, because I've never been in your space. I'm kind of in a similar space as far as with a podcast now, about trying to work with different people, and it's entertainment to a certain degree. For my show, Instagram is I never expected to be such an incredible tool for me, but it's huge for me to be able to network and find guests and do stuff. And Instagram has kind of been how I've been able to do that stuff. I don't have an agent, obviously. I'm pretty small. I don't have a manager or anything like that. When you started doing all this stuff, because you're a little bit older than me. How old are you?
Right now, I'm 39.
Yeah, so I'm 30. So when I was growing up, this was before cell phones and stuff, and you're a little bit before me. So you at the beginning of your career certainly weren't just on Instagram, putting up videos, and then people just discover you on the discovery page, and now they're hitting you up for Ellen and all that type of thing. So, but if you look on your website, you've been in Japan. We were talking about off mic, how you'd go all over the country, all over the world, doing all these things. How do you line up those types of things? How did that happen when you, what tools, I guess, did you use?
It's a great question. And the crazy thing is this. The most important thing is you have to work harder on yourself than you do on tools initially. And what I mean by that, and I'll give you the tools and what you're asking, but I think your listeners, I hope you guys listening get more value out of this. What I had to do first was realize and do a paradigm shift of my view of the world and my view of getting access to television shows and stuff. To us, being on TV growing up is oh my God, you're a superstar. How that only incredible people who are rich and famous do that. No, that's not true. We made that up. Nobody told us that. To be frank, how I got on Ellen, I called him up and I asked. And so, it's this mysterious thing of how do you get on a show? Now, granted, they're going to ask what's in it for us. What is your gimmick? What value will you provide our show? So you have to be able to answer that. You can't just go on and be a guy and just talk about the weather. You have to, look at the show. What type of content do they want and things like that. Ellen, it was call her up and say, hi. My manager, I told my manager, I said, hey, call up Ellen. I want to be on the show. He goes, are you nuts? Now granted, I had just done a television show, so I had a little bit of credibility, but I was still just a guy. So I called up and asked, and they said yes. And then if I wanted to do a radio show, a big radio show, nationally syndicated or whatever, we called them up and we asked. Now, again, I have the benefit of doing some really weird stuff. I read people's minds, okay, and do, demonstrations that are seemingly psychic, psychokinesis, moving objects with my mind. So, granted, people are going to listen when you have stuff like that, and I had a little bit of credibility from the one TV appearance. But as long as you're providing value, there's a guy right now that works for the biggest television show in the world, and he's sitting on a toilet eating a ham sandwich, and he's got a cell phone and an email address. And when you really break it down like that and stop making it such a mystical, horrible, terrible, scary, amazing, difficult thing and say, yeah, it's easy. There's a human, and I need to talk to that human. I have to figure out how to. I have to find an email address and a phone number and a name. That's all there is to it. And then you present what you want to do for that person. What value are you providing them? And you always get by giving. So what can I give to them? What's my thing? And then ask. And here's something I'll give you. I got to tell you guys this. The biggest thing is yes lives in a world of no. You cannot have one without the other. And if you start to fear no, you're restricting yourself. I love no's, bro. I collect no's like baseball cards. I love no. I'm a lunatic. I'll go out, and this is something, I wrote a book called Mind Candy, and I put this in the book because it's one of the most powerful things that drove me being able to follow my passion as a career. Yes lives in a world, no. You can't have one without the other, but mathematically, the more no's you hear in your life, also, the more yeses you will hear. If you ask 100 people for something and you hear 98 no's, but you get 2 yeses, imagine if you asked 1,000,000 people that question. Your percentage of yeses exponentially rises. Mathematic fact. You can't get away from it. So I love no. So how do I get on the shows? I ask. Now you're seeing the yeses that I got. You're not seeing the number of no's that I got. I got way more no's. If I had a section on my website of the television shows I didn't ever get on, it'd be way larger than the ones that I did. So, twofold: ask, think logically. There's a human. I need to get a hold of them and present them with value. So that's number one. And number two, you have to provide value. Ask. And then also there's the fact of once you do one, you have proof of concept. So you can say, look what I did for this show. Here's a video, watch it. If you're trying to get your first appearance or your first thing, you have to invest time and energy in creating a dope video that shows them exactly what you're going to do. A lot of people will make a sizzle reel about them, like, I'm just a cool guy and I have, but don't make a sizzle about you. Show them, producers are very visual people. Show them exactly what they're going to get if you go on the show. If you're a musician, play a song on video, have some good production value, make it look cool, have it well produced, put some effort into it, and then just ask. So that's how it worked.
Well, I mean, and for one, like at the time, they probably had less people asking than now in DMs of people, hitting them up, because it takes a lot of humility to like be willing to take that rejection. I think I totally agree with you. And I try to explain this to people all the time. I touch on it a lot, but for one, exactly, you need to build yourself up or your service up to provide value, ultimately to solve somebody's problem, right? Like we talked about before. Ellen's problem was she needed to find the most entertaining guest possible, right? You just wanted to provide her a solution for that, of saying, hey, I could solve that problem for you on this episode. And then, yeah, you had the credibility because you're on the show and you were able to present that. And now they're like, okay, cool, you're right. This is going to solve that problem. You know what I mean? But that's ultimately what it has to be. What sucks so bad for me, and I hate this so much, and I don't like to be negative, but it's mostly just because I love people and their abilities. I see so many artists, whether it's musicians or like fine art or whatever, that I'm like blown away by, that aren't succeeding. And it's because they're forgetting that back end of it. It's because they're they believe that what they have is good, right? But they're not willing to take that rejection, and they don't want to put themselves out there and tell people that it's good. It's like this weird sense of like modesty. And yes, you can be modest, but if you're going to convince somebody else to believe that your service is the right one for them, you have to believe that your service is the right one for them, and you have to be able to explain that to them
Without a doubt.
You know what I mean? And that's really hard for people to do. So you've overcome the no's, and I actually was going to bring it up, so I'm glad that you already brought it up, because I remember watching again WayneHoffman.com. I'm sitting there like researching stuff, and I heard that, and I was like, man, that's powerful. I really, really enjoy that. But as we grow, people think that everything just gets really easy. Right. And it doesn't, because you just kind of get to the next little plateau or whatever. Like you're always hitting plateaus throughout your career, and anything that you do, you're just getting the next step. And then you're looking around and you're like, okay, well, how do I improve upon this? So everyone's always facing challenges, right? What are the current challenges? Because you don't have everything. What are the current challenges that you're still kind of trying to navigate? But not including COVID. We can get to COVID after the next music break. But what other challenges are you still facing in your whole journey?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I'm in a unique position in my career where what you're talking about plateaus. I remember I was living in LA, and I forget what I had accomplished something. I don't know. Maybe it was right after Ellen, or I just did this big thing, and I went into my place and I went, now what? It was weird. It was like my whole life I was trying to get on television to show my art form, and then I did it, and now I have like, okay, what do I do? Like I've reached that goal. So, I'm at this point where I've built a career. And I now have this platform. My challenges are it's weird. My challenges now are what a lot of people would think is blessings in a weird way. I want to do so many projects right now, and it's where to put my energy, because I want to create amazing online content. My YouTube has cool stuff on it, but I really want to make it a home for people as opposed to just go watch cool stuff. I want to make it a home and build a community there. So I want to put my energy there. I've written that book, Mind Candy. I want to write another book, ironically, about how to find your passion in life. Because I wrote the book, Mind Candy, to show people how to be successful after they find their passion. What these mind hacks to use to find their passion. But then after I wrote the book, a lot of people came to me and said, well, I didn't find my passion yet. How do I find it? I was like, whoa. Because I always knew mine since I was a kid. I forgot that there are people out there that don't have one yet. So I want to write a book, working title, The Buffet of Life, on how to find your passion. And the theory is treat life like a buffet. You can try something. If you don't like it, don't eat anymore. Sample everything. Grab a chemistry set. Grab a camera. Take a photo. Pick up a guitar. Go skateboarding. Try to write a book. Bake something. Maybe you're a pastry chef and you just don't know it because you haven't stepped into that world yet. So, writing that book, having the YouTube channel, we spoke earlier while you were getting set up here about me wanting to do a podcast. I want to teach people entrepreneurship and how to start their own business, leadership speaking, and I'm also now doing keynotes. I'm creating 4 different television shows right now that I'm building out the concepts and creating pitch decks for. So my problem right now is truly, when you're passionate about so many things, it's where do you put your energy? And that's my struggle right now, working on really finding and prioritizing how I want to interact with the world. And so that's one of my biggest hurdles right now is I'm passionate about a lot of things, and I really want to serve people and get engage with people on these different platforms in different ways. So that, and then a big one for me is having work-life balance, which a lot of people lack. Some people are so passionate about something that they are consumed by it, and you have to be careful with that. Because again, there's a difference between following your being in flow with the universe and doing something you enjoy and just kind of like vibing and just living a great life because you're not working hard against something. You're just doing what you love and flowing. And then being, there's a difference between that and being consumed. So, my career takes me on the road a lot. If somebody calls me and says, hey, I want to pay you to perform, it's hard to say no to that now. Early in my career, I had to work really hard just to do one event. And if I flew somewhere, it was I can't believe I'm actually flying somewhere to do my thing. And now it's the reverse. I have to schedule time to be with my family and schedule time. It was a weird shift. So again, it's personal stuff. And like I always say, I think Jim Rohn said this. I think it was him. You have to work harder on yourself than you do on your job.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and ultimately it's you have one life, right? And you want to be able to look back on it and be stoked on how you spent that time. And like you're never going to do things 100%, right? If you go back and fix, like, tweak this, that, or whatever, some people say they would, but ultimately, like, you want to be able to look back and be like, yeah, that was the best way I could have spent my time. And sometimes it's not on your career. Sometimes it's on other things, right? Because it's about the things you're passionate about. It's the things that make you feel fulfilled. Being a father makes you feel fulfilled. Probably taking a weekend trip or hanging by your pool with the kids and stuff makes you feel fulfilled. It's like there's other aspects of it. And I want to know this, because I feel like this is probably something that comes up. Once you get to this point in your career, the expectations there, right? To be able to put out these types of things. People expect you to, like, come out with what's next, you know what I mean, all the time. Does that pressure, is that kind of built into why you put so much energy into all of these things?
Wow, what a fantastic question. I'll tell you this, at this point in my career, no, stop. Let me rephrase that. At this point in my life as a human, I think I've matured enough to not fall under that pressure. It is difficult. And yes, I was there for a very long time. I've started reading a lot more, and again, working on myself, not just my passion, not just my job, not just the things that are on the surface level, but that inner stuff. So I've gotten to the point now where I could easily completely change my identity if I wanted to. I've done Wayne Hoffman, Mentalist, and Illusionist. That's a guy. That's a creature. You know what I mean? It's I don't want to say Jekyll and Hyde, but that guy that you see on television doing these crazy things is something that I've created. But I could easily grab a backpack, go to Thailand, make some friendship bracelets on a beach and sell those and totally reinvent myself. So is the pressure there? Yes, if you choose to acknowledge it. And so I think as far as my brand is concerned as a performer, sure, there's a market and I could sell my services and constantly do things to serve that person and that brand that I've created. But, it's important to be able to recognize those pressures that come along and don't be subservient to them. I do create content, but I do it consciously and with purpose because I choose to, not because I feel pressured to.
Yeah, hopefully we can all kind of get to that point. I think another thing is, like, people, like you're saying about this person, this creature, it's almost like a character, right? That, like, you build up, and this is what people believe that you are, but that's just what people believe you are, not necessarily who you are. And your goals, your dreams, your passions, it's meant to be a fluid thing that changes over time. And that's totally okay. And you get boxed into people believing that this is what Wayne Hoffman's about. But if all of a sudden you start this podcast and you're like, I want to do this now, there's no reason that you can't. Totally. Just because other people expect you to do something, ultimately it's your life that, again, you have to look back on and be happy that this is how I spent my time. And sometimes it's hard when people expect something else from you, and that's the zone you've been in. But if you can overcome that and just not acknowledge that pressure, like you're saying, and still be true to yourself and do whatever the next thing is that you want to do, I really applaud people that do that. Because especially when you get to a certain level of success, I feel like it's a lot harder for them to walk away. You know what I mean? But at the same time, like you're saying, a buffet, well, you can go to a Chinese buffet, but you can go to an Indian buffet. You know what I mean? Maybe you haven't even sampled all these things. You're only 39. You're not that old. So there's like a lot of things you haven't tried that maybe all of a sudden you'll try something. Like I got into scuba diving, a few years ago, and I never thought scuba diving was gonna be something I was gonna be into. But now I'm super into scuba diving. Anyways, I just want to address this quick because obviously everyone's wondering. COVID has been a huge challenge for everybody, anybody that works for themselves. Some people who work for bigger companies and can work remotely, it hasn't affected their income a whole lot. They haven't had to change too much for their career, but for the most people, it's been incredibly difficult. I imagine for yourself being an entertainer, obviously you're not traveling around doing all these shows. So it's a totally different thing, right? How has COVID kind of affected what you were doing for your career? How has it changed?
Dramatically. For me, I mean, anybody listening, you could tell the events industry and the entertainment industry was annihilated. It's literally, my job was to go and gather large groups of people in a room and have them all sit together, very close together, while I do something amazing that they clap for, hopefully. Well, literally, my audience is now illegal in some places, and events, weddings and any gatherings of people. So the events industry was annihilated. The people that do lighting and sound and DJs and bands and the people that do floral arrangements and set up chairs and tables. I mean, this whole industry, billions of dollars lost. So for me personally, March came around and I started getting these cancellations, and my manager's calling me going, "Hey man, we got another cancellation, another one." I was in Vegas at the time. I'm like, okay, this is just a quick little thing. It'll go away. And then, a world tour was basically canceled in its entirety. I think I had one show. So I started to think, well, okay, now what? Well, after, I think everybody in my industry did that period of a week or two of not knowing what to do, and you're just sitting at home like, what do I do? But eventually I started to say, okay, this is where I think my mindset really served both myself and my clients and the world, I'd like to think, on a larger scale. I started to think, okay, there's a problem. People aren't able to have entertainment right now. People aren't able to connect. They're not able to celebrate. They're not able to, do these things where I'm usually a part of them. What can I do to serve the people that are hurting right now? And it's the whole, when there's a war, if you're selling the bandages, you're the guy winning, So I'm like, okay, this whole concept of doing a show online. At first, I'll be frank, I thought, this is stupid. This is like I'm begging, like I'm really scraping at life to try to get to get something and do something, and it's going to be fruitless. And a few of my colleagues started creating virtual shows. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. This isn't real. I get my energy from a live audience, cheering, and I find that to be extremely rewarding. I can't get that, online. It's just weird. So I'm like, all right, I people want entertainment. So I'm going to create a virtual show. I said the keyword of the year, and this has been beat to death, but the word was pivot. I had to pivot and do something different to serve my audience and serve myself. So I created this online show. First one in, I'm like, this is going to be horrible, and I know it already. And it was okay. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Again, that whole, if you're going to tell yourself a story, make it a good one. But, you get these thoughts creeping in, and you have to face a little bit of reality the first time you do something new, especially as an art form. First time you pick up a guitar, you're not going to be a master guitarist. You have to face reality. So I created the virtual show, and not only did it help me survive and serve my clients, it helped me thrive. And the crazy thing is, I'm busier now than I was pre-COVID. In one day, I did a show in India, London, California, and New York, all in one day, because I was in the studio. I built a studio. I learned a whole new skill set. I spent months mastering cameras, lenses, lighting. I invested money in learning these things, laptops and cables and wires. And so built the online show called Distant Deceptions. And it's an interactive show where I read your mind through the screen, and it's limitless. And one of the first performances I did, ironically, it was very weird, for Willie Nelson, the country music star, and he had Matthew McConaughey and Casey Musgraves and a bunch of celebrities. And I somehow got into the mix, ended up on there. So how did it affect me? It annihilated me, but it made me creative and it made me stronger. And honestly, now I love it. I love it. I love doing the virtual show because it's a whole new creative process for me. And it enabled me, like, it's weird. At first I was cursing this. Oh man, this is terrible. But now, honestly, I would probably do it all over again because I'm able to be at home with my family, drive to the studio we have set up, do my show, and sleep on my pillow at night. And that, for me, as a traveling entertainer, was the biggest blessing in the world. You know how they say, God works in mysterious ways. Well, it's odd because I was thinking to myself, I have to figure out a way to still earn money, but be at home, the work-life balance. And, well, the universe shut down Earth and allowed me to do it. So, yeah, that's my story.
Well, I'm glad it worked out. And sometimes it's just nice to have like something different, even if it's like a huge challenge and it seems daunting. Sometimes like you get in a routine, like you said before, even with like when you live a very unique life, you still get in a certain routine. And sometimes to break out of that routine, all of a sudden it makes you enjoy certain things more. It makes you appreciate, different parts of it more. And it now all of a sudden you have a whole extra skill set because moving forward after this, you can do both, which is obviously super helpful for you. Obviously you've been interviewed a bunch of times, and it's usually directly about, your mentalist and illusionist career. I always just like to know a fun fact where you haven't talked about it before on a show. What's a fun fact? What's something that most people don't know about you that they're going to come over here and they're going to learn about Wayne?
Wow. Wow, that's a great question. I think just I'll rattle off some of the things, like a few little nuggets. I love painting. I love art, generally speaking. There's this huge painting on the wall over here, and I painted that. And I remember the moment that I did it, and I felt so happy and like, I don't know how to describe it. I just felt like I was living my passion. I enjoyed it. I felt like, I wasn't making it to become a great artist. I didn't do it as a career, but I enjoy grabbing paint and visualizing something and creating it. It's not, realism. I'm not drawing painting an apple and trying to make it look like an apple. It's just an expression, a creative expression. So I think that's something that not a lot of people know about me, is my love for art. Generally speaking, I love studying, artists from every century. I love visiting museums. And when I travel, I guess that's another part of it. I mean, the room we're sitting in right now, you see all sorts of funky things going on. These are I make it a habit that when I travel anywhere new, and I don't care if it's Sheboygan, Wisconsin, or Tokyo, Japan, I buy a local handicraft from that region as a kind of a memory. So, when I'm old and gray, if I make it that long, I will be able to kind of, in a moment, look at an object and say, wow, I remember this memory. So I like that. I like supporting small local artisans. I like getting involved in art. And I think it's just, what I do as a mentalist and illusionist is its own art form. So people don't view it that way. They don't call it art. Magic is art. They don't. They go, whatever. Oh, that's weird or that's cool, but they don't call it art. So I like art generally speaking. Whether it's, watching someone craft something live in front of me, painting myself. But yeah, that's kind of one of my secret passions and a world I live in outside of, reading people's minds.
Well, it all comes down to creative expression. You know what I mean? And that's why like a lot of people say skateboarding is an art form in that way too. It's just a way to release that creative energy and do your own thing. And sometimes it's cool when you have something totally on the side. I think it was Aaron Rodgers that was talking about how, one of the biggest things for him to be successful is when he found playing guitar as like something totally on the side that there's no pressure to accomplish anything, but you can still get that creative energy out. And painting is a huge thing for that. I actually paint all the time. I don't know if you've seen any of my stuff, but I'll show you one. It's totally different than yours. They're a little ridiculous, but I just finished a painting last night, so I'll show you that.
Awesome.
Show you that after this. So what's next? I mean, obviously you're going to do some more virtual stuff. With COVID, there's a big cloud of wondering when, what's normal, what's new normal, whatever. But if people now are going to go follow you, which you can give that plug again, what can they expect to see over the coming weeks, months, year, couple years?
That's great. Yeah. So what my plan right now is to create a community, more so interacting and serving the people that are in my sphere. So if you're listening to this, I guess you're included now, and creating awesome content that's both inspirational, motivational, educational, and just magical and amazing. So, using my art form to, again, serve that higher purpose. So I'm going to be building that community on different platforms and YouTube and, so on and so forth. So you'll see that coming out as you follow my journey. And one of the only goals that I haven't accomplished yet that I am, and I always say I don't call it chasing a dream, because it's not. It's working hard and building it and doing doable actions, is my own show. And I have, a few different concepts that I'm working on. So whether it ends up on a Netflix or a Hulu or one of the major, TV networks, I'm not sure where it'll live, but that's what's coming next. And I have some really cool, super cool concepts. And one of them right now, I have a guy building a pitch deck for it to get that out. So that's going to happen. I don't know when. I don't know when it'll be viewable, but it will happen. And I don't know what platform, but it'll be out there. So just stay tuned, as they say, because that's a big goal of mine. That's in the works.
That's exciting.
It's happening.
I'm excited to watch it. I mean, it's awesome when it's your own thing, because when you go on somebody else's show or whatever, you have to kind of like, how do I fit within the story that they're trying to tell, rather than just painting the whole picture yourself. And the complete creative freedom, it's tougher because there's a lot more you got to handle. You can't just show up and do your thing, but you have so much more freedom with what you're doing. So I'm excited to see what your mind, after looking at that painting, which is pretty abstract, what your mind puts together for a show. So I always get to this point in the show just because like it's my favorite part. When you do stuff that's like really unique for a living, you follow your passion, you're doing something that isn't what the majority of people do. You have really cool experiences that end up happening because of that. Just really unique stuff. Like obviously you were on Ellen, which was surreal, right? I've had a lot of different ones over the years, and I've talked about them, and I'm kind of running out of like really cool ideas, besides the fact that right now I'm sitting with I'm interviewing somebody that Ellen Degeneres interviewed. That's kind of a cool little accolade now to throw in my belt. But yeah, so coming here was really awesome for you. What's an experience that you got to have that you're super grateful for, but it only happened because you chose this path?
It's awesome. What a great question, man. You're really doing it. That's great, because you're always going to get a unique answer too. Like it'll never be the same, man. A lot of things come to my mind. I've lived a wacky life, bro. Like imagine just saying I'm a mind reader. Okay, go. Like you can make up a million stories. Just not make up a million stories. Recall actual crazy events that took place. Some of them I can't even say. I don't know if this is a PG-13 show, but I think the one that comes to mind like really heavily is I ended up going for business to Africa, and I went to Togo in West Africa, and I land in Lomé. And I had heard that there's a suburb of Lomé called Akadesawa, and it's where they have a voodoo market. And I'm not talking like a tourist place, like a real voodoo market, like where you're going there to buy voodoo items. So I did research online and about this, and I saw somebody who created a video about this particular market and this particular guy. A. Joseph was his name. I don't know what the A stood for. A. Joseph. And I'm like, I'm going to find that guy. I'm going to Africa and find this exact human and I'm going to do it. And so I documented the journey. If you go on YouTube, this is going way back. But if you search Wayne Hoffman voodoo market, you'll see it. And so I traveled with some guy I randomly met. We hired a guy to drive us to this suburb in Africa. And we pull up and it's a dirt lot and they're selling some wild stuff, and it was like, porcupine quills, cheetah heads, feet of elephants, like, from an animal rights standpoint, it was terrible. From a cultural learning experience, it was wild and obviously memorable. But I went through a voodoo ceremony. Now, for me, doing magic and the mystical arts, it's rooted in shamanism and voodoo. Now it's a theater art where, hey, look at this cool thing, but it's rooted in actual, where people believe in magic. And so now I get to go to the root of my art form in Africa and go through a voodoo ceremony where they're literally throwing bones, and it was the marché des fétiches, which is the fetish market. And a fetish is an object that you can hold that it has importance in voodoo. So I do this whole voodoo ceremony, and there's a kid in the corner fanning us with leaves, like huge palm leaves, in this little hut. And so after the voodoo ceremony, I purchased some little things to protect me while traveling, and these little things. And then I said, I'm like, I gotta do this. And I asked the guy, I said, you've shown me your magic. Can I show you mine? And he says, yes. And I said, gather your people. And so he got all these people from this voodoo market. And none of them speak English, by the way. And they come over, and now I'm like, okay, this is going one of two ways. I'm either about to die and they're going to just boil me right here, or I'm going to become their leader. So I pick up a little pebble off the ground and I give it to one of the children that were there, and I had him close his hand around it, and I really hammed it up. I was like, really like concentrating, and the kid opened his hand and it had turned into their local money, their currency, a coin. And all of a sudden they lost it. Everybody's grabbing pebbles and going, oh, they thought I could actually, because it was like voodoo, they thought I had special magic powers to turn rocks into money. So the guy, the head voodoo priest, took me aside under a tree. I'll never forget this because I'm like nervous at this point. And he goes, can you give me these powers? Can you give me these powers? And I'm like, no. And I'm thinking, oh God, how am I going to get out of this? Am I going to die? What is about to transpire here? And he's like, why not? And I'm thinking, and I'm like, well, because it'll take a long time. He goes, how long? I said, I don't know. I've been doing it. It took me about 30 years to be able to do this. And this guy was probably in his 70s. So he's like, oh, too long for me. And so I got off the hook. I skated. So having that experience and being in a voodoo market in Africa and going through a voodoo ceremony would have never, ever, 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 never happened had I not followed my passion.
No, you would have been sitting in the bank.
Totally.
Totally different. That's an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Getting towards the end, I always like to ask this too. We all make mistakes and bad calls. Doesn't matter how successful you are. Doesn't matter what you've accomplished. We all make mistakes and bad calls that if you could go back, you're like, it's not that I would redo anything, but if I had that knowledge, I wonder how much more successful I could have been, because this was something that, I don't know, held me back to a certain degree, at least for a little bit. Can you share a mistake that you made that taught you something that was really valuable later on that you think other people might gain value from?
I think lacking the knowledge, two things. Number one, if you're doing what you love to do, which in my case, I can only speak to my journey, I underestimated the importance of the business end of it and learning finance and learning money management and business savvy and marketing and all the things that go with it. I think with anybody, look at your journey and what you want to create from a bird's eye view. People get obsessed on maybe let's say you're a skateboarder. They get obsessed with learning one trick, this one thing. They got to master the 720 or they're not going to ever, and they get upset. But look at it from an outside view. Look at everything that's encompassed into doing what you're doing. And if you have a mission or a goal, or even if you don't forget why you're doing it. If you have, the mission of creating a business out of it, which I did, I totally focused in on my art too much. So for the first 5 years, at least, it was all about this move. How can I make this little thing disappear? I learned, I can't even count, an uncountable number of ways to shuffle a deck of cards. Literally, probably, I don't know, maybe hundreds of ways. I can now shuffle cards one-handed with the little bridge thing at the end. One-handed. But at the same time, I totally forgot about the business end. So I think my mistake was being too narrow-minded and not realizing my journey was multifaceted. And I would just say to anybody listening, if you're following your passion for the sake of doing it, if you're an artist and you do acrylics, pick up a charcoal pencil as well. Don't be so narrow-minded and say, I have to paint because I'm a painter. Pick up a pencil, do a black and white, realism sketch of a person's face. Broaden your view of what you're doing. Look at it from a bird's eye view, because you're so into your art that sometimes you become too focused and narrow-minded. If you're doing it for a business, for me, it's called show business. And I focused way too long on the show and not hard enough on the business, at least starting out. Yeah.
Yeah, well, people get really good at whatever individual thing they have, right? But they need to remember that you have a whole utility belt of tools. Doesn't matter if you don't tend to use that one tool all the time, but you need to recognize that tool's still available, and sometimes you need to use that tool. And that's what I'm talking about with like marketing and advertisement or promotion or whatever. Like that maybe not be the tool you want to use all the time, and you may not be as good with that tool, but you can't totally ignore it. Right. That's something you still have to recognize. Sometimes the show part isn't going to be what sells it. You need to be able to put together that video that you show somebody, totally, which is the promo side. So you always got to realize you have all these tools and like, how do we use these most effectively? So we're at the end of the show. I always like to ask too, how can people best support you? Because not always is it like buying products, right? Sometimes it's following somebody on like a social media. Sometimes it's sharing something. Sometimes it's making a connection for somebody, or sometimes it's just sending an email or a message saying, hey, I watched this thing and it really meant something to me. I appreciate that. How can people best support you moving forward?
I'll tell you what. Here's something that I'd like to create. I didn't plan on doing this, but the way you phrased that inspired me a little bit. So I was talking about this book that I wrote, Mind Candy, and it's for sale on Amazon and iTunes, and you can go buy the Kindle version and all this stuff. So here's what I'll do. I'm going to do this in a weird way. The best way to support me is to allow me to support you. Yes, you, the person listening to this right now. So I'm going to give you the book for free to download. And the best way to support me is read the book. I hate reading personally. I'm not going to lie. So I wrote the book. It's terribly written. It's okay. But the concepts in this book will help you personally and professionally. And that is my promise. It's only 85 pages. Anybody can read 85 pages. If you go to WayneHoffman.com and go in the shop and put the book, it's called Mind Candy, into your cart and use the code Wayne Loves Me, it'll be free. You download it. You'll get the PDF version. Read that book, okay? And then here's how you can support me. Number one, use the knowledge in there, the little mind hacks you learn, to do something awesome. And then I want you to email me and let me know how it helped you. So that's the best way. Allow me to change your life for the better. I don't want your money. Use the code Wayne Loves Me, and I just want a good story, man. Send me an email and say, hey, this one section, I just had the craziest experience because of that.
please make sure you send it to me as well, passionboardshop@gmail.com. I want to hear what happened from this.
Send this to both of us, because like we're sitting here recording this, and right now in the future somebody's going to listen to this, they're going to read it, have this experience, and one day you and I are both going to get this email and we're going to go, oh.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.